Hello, guys. So this is episode number 2 with Peter Lowe's, and we carry on talking about the horror, the spirituality of horror, actually, and how cool I can say that is for Christians to embrace horror and the grotesque, and which is directly connected with a lot of the themes within metal, especially extreme metal, isn't it? So, if you haven't watched the first episode, I will leave a link in the description. Or if you're listening this or on your favorite podcast platform, then check the show notes, and there will be the link uh, for the first episode, but also you can just like go on the list and check the episode before that. So there we are, me and Peter Lowe's. I mean, if you say like, say for instance, like going back to my studies, like for instance, psychopaths, you
Yeah.
find them in really high corporate, they
Mm.
white collar, they're wearing
Yeah.
four-figure suits,
Hmm.
so they're not the kids in the neighborhood that they're wearing chains
Yeah. That's
and
right. They're
Cannibal
normally
Corpse t-shirts. Which
yeah, they're normally quite
I bought my
successful.
first Cannibal Corpse t-shirts a couple of days ago.
All right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny because I do it. I've got a Patreon, and we've started doing these things called game nights, where all the patrons get together and we live stream it on Twitch and YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and stuff. And we just play crazy weird games. And we played a game the other night, which was there was two games. One of them was Who's Possessed, and it was basically and it was listening to celebrity voices, and I had put in like weird demonic voices into their voice, and you were trying to figure out which celebrity it was that was possessed by an ancient Babylonian demon, and it was like Steven Spielberg, that sort of thing. But then we did another session, which is called From Whence It Came, which is a game where I will play an obscure track from a record and then show them covers of these records, and then they would guess which one it's from. And we did a death metal round where there was a band called I think they were called like Cattle Decapitation or something.
Yeah, Cattle Decapitation.
Yeah.
They're quite, they're relatively the newest bands. Yeah, they're not
Okay.
like
Yeah. Yeah. And the cover was Humanure. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's like of a
no.
cow. It's a cow, and there's like a person just coming out of its ass and like melting out of its, and just
I,
these covers were so shocking. But
I mean,
like,
Cattle Decapitation. They've done some. I'm not. I have listened to them like a few times. They have done some really bizarre things. They have like this song that they called "Forced Gender Reassignment,"
right,
and it's as I
snatching.
mean, the video clip is banned, and me being
Oh, is it?
me, I spent like about an hour trying to find it.
Searching it down, yeah.
So it is like a really bad, really graphic B
Mm,
type slasher horror film, and like something like
yeah.
yeah, it's like it was no wonder that was but
Mm.
YouTube doesn't have it. Everyone tried to upload it, YouTube takes it down.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, right.
so you have to find like nearly like some like really someone like uploaded to their own website
Yeah, yeah.
basically.
Ah.
Yeah.
But yeah, but anyway, I mean, like, I suppose what we're saying, both of us, this the interest in these things does not come from a dark place.
Mm.
And I say this in the Frighteners particularly, is that actually when you look at the emotions people feel when they are at a metal concert or when they're at the cinema watching a horror film, if you just take away the stimulus and only look at the emotions, they tend to feel, yes, they feel fear at the horror film, but they feel adventure, and they feel high stakes drama and satisfaction they've survived, and excitement. And sometimes I think, particularly with supernatural horror films, an intrigue about the possibility of there being life after death and spirituality and stuff. And so all of these, or when you're at a concert, elation, or just thrill and excitement. All of these are positive emotions.
Yeah, there was a
Um,
research done a few years ago. I, I, I cannot find it. I read it like a few years ago, and it was saying basically they did this research with horror films, and they noticed that the same with horror, like really gruesome horror scenes, the areas of your brain and your the feelings that are coming, and the areas of your brain that activate is the same, exactly the same like you have in an orgasm.
oh right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, people actually went for a cigarette.
Well, yeah, that was a good decapitation. Yeah,
Exactly, you get exactly the same like
yeah. I mean,
feelings.
don't get me wrong. I mean, there are sometimes horror films that I watch that do exactly what they're supposed to do, in the sense that I feel horrified and disgusted. But again, that doesn't mean it's not a valuable use of my time.
Have you
It's
ever said what's anything that you found it disturbing?
um, I suppose, like, I mean,
I mean, I found the ABCs of Death, the first one. I don't know if you watched
oh
them.
yeah, I watched that. Yeah, yeah,
The first one, it was some flakes of the first one. I found them really disturbing. And
yeah,
it's like
yeah. Some of them were quite intense.
some of them they were completely ridiculous. Like the one with the badger, for instance. Like
Yeah, wasn't the one about like a Japanese girl sniffing another girl's fart or something, or was that in the second one? But that was weird, but kind of cool. But no, I remember that. But I'm lucky enough. I write a horror film column for a magazine called the 40 Times, and I write articles for them too, which explores like the paranormal and strange things. But I write horror film reviews for them, and so I get sent horror films before they come out, which is really exciting
wow.
to get access to them.
like a listing or like big ones or just or,
Sometimes you get invited to the screenings, the press screenings of the bigger ones, but often it's I specifically ask for re-releases of older ones because I love that stuff. But then yeah, you'll get like everything that's on Shudder and all these sorts of things you get to see, which is the streaming service for horror, and other things like that. I'll tend to see early. And sometimes, yes, I can watch stuff that is disturbing, but again, I don't think that makes it like it shouldn't exist. Like there's one of the scariest, or sorry, not the scariest, the most shocking book I've ever read, novel I've ever read, is called The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum, and like that's got trigger warnings all over it, and I won't go into what it's about, but that is a horrifying book. But when I was reading it, I wasn't titillated or anything. I was crying in that book. I remember towards the end, my like tears were just running down my face because of just how horrific that was. And as I closed the book, I remember thinking that book has done a good thing. It's reminded me of the impact of violence. You know, you don't want horror films to always be fun, because they'll
I mean, it reminded me one of my, and I really admire that person. Her name is Caroline Spring. So
right.
Caroline is a survivor of child abuse,
Right. Okay.
torture. She was
Oh, great.
in pedophile rings, and now she's a therapist, and
Ugh,
she's teaching about trauma.
wow.
I mean, her books, the two books, I was reading her books, and I was like, I was depressed. The days
Yeah.
I was reading her book, but it was that depression that makes you feel okay, what I'm doing. So it like started to
Yeah.
become a therapist. Yes, that's a valid thing. I need to
Hmm.
do that because like the people out there that they had and they need to be healed, and
Yeah.
her motto actually is like recovery is my best revenge. So the
Hmm.
worst thing I can do to my abuser is to recover, to have a good life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously,
Exactly.
send them to prison, and
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
yeah,
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. But I mean, I suppose talking of therapy, it's things like ACT therapy, which is acceptance commitment therapy. Would say, it's not useful to like act as if the bad stuff isn't there. There's a monster in your house and it wants to fight you every day. And you can try and pretend it's not there, but if you do, that's just going to make it worse. You kind of almost like this is why I like a film like The Babadook, which is a good film.
I know it, but I haven't watched it.
It's really worth watching, but that's a great film from a therapy perspective and really deep thoughts on dealing with depression or anxiety, but personified as a top hat wearing scary demon guy. But a film like that, reminds us that, as a society, it's actually, I think, a little bit dangerous to pretend that there is no dark side. And I remember when I was a teenager, when I was working with teenagers as a youth worker, and we were sitting, we were doing like a 24/7 prayer type thing once, and we were discussing the thoughts that go through our heads. And every now, like a few people were talking about how, oh, well, sometimes, when I'm on a high building, I think about throwing myself off it. Or another person was like, oh, yeah, sometimes when I'm in front of a train waiting for the London Underground, I think about stepping in front of it.
So it was like they were suicidal.
Well, no,
Okay.
they weren't. They were just curious. And this is the point. It's like when you're growing up, but even with my book, I interviewed people. I interviewed a literary agent. It wasn't my literary agent, but it was a different agent. I interviewed her, and she says, oh, yeah, when I'm in the tube station, sometimes I think about taking my laptop and smacking it off someone's head. And she says, I wouldn't do it, but it's just
Is it
a
like
thought.
that you have video games?
Yeah, exactly. She go back and like play flipping
Resident Evil,
The Last of Us or something, and you'll be all right. But yeah, it's like, but the really hardcore evangelical Christians could come along and say, wait a minute, you're under demonic attack. The devil is trying to get you to kill yourself. You have to battle with that demon, and it creates this situation, which is, don't get me wrong, if someone is properly suicidal, of course you get them help. I'm not suggesting that, but in this scenario,
you don't put them on a exorcism session.
no, exactly. You don't start getting the holy water out and stuff, and it's just there's an amazing kind of diffusion when you realize that sometimes weird things come into your head, and it's often just pure curiosity.
I remember similar situation. We had this conversation too. I'm an electrician by trade, so we worked into this building site when I was still before I started my own business. And we got hooked up with another guy. He was into zombies and video zombies. And we started talking if it's like the zombie apocalypse, I'll do this. And he was like, yeah, I wish my neighbor turned into zombie and then I smash his head.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like he wanted to kill his neighbor. It was probably he found it irritating. It was I wish he turned into zombie and smash his head.
Exactly.
But it was like a joke.
Yeah, and I think the wisdom comes in being able to tell when someone's messing around or when someone's and I appreciate there might be some times when someone is serious about that, but most times they're just not. But what happens, and I talk about this particularly with children in the Frighteners book, is that when a young person, let's say, starts drawing morbid drawings, or starts playing scary, violent video games, or liking horror films, or liking metal, what tends to happen is if the parents and the teachers and the adults around them start to see that as overtly negative, they start to feed into this narrative that shapes them into being what they fear them to be when they're not. So
and it's also a concept of shame comes as well, is that you've been shamed for what you like.
Yeah, it creates a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where, imagine one young person playing, let's say, I don't know, The Last of Us or The Evil Within or Resident Evil or whatever, and killing a lot of zombies on their PlayStation, and having the whole family going, well, that's a bit violent, but I know it's just a game. Or having the family going, that's disgusting. Why do you do that? What is wrong with you? Why are you attracted to that when nobody in their right mind would do that? And that just tells this narrative to the person, crap, maybe there is something wrong with me. And when you look at school shooters and all these different people, you'll tend to find that the thing that drove them to this is not the horror films and the video games. It's the sense of isolation and loneliness and anger. that they have, and that's a
And
completely
that's
separate
a
matter.
one you can easily fall into extremist groups and take advantage of you.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So as long as we're open to, obviously there are real violence happens, so we don't
Yeah.
want to be completely naive. But that book was supposed to be, and it is, a pastoral response, I think, to people who like scary stuff, because I want them to know that they are not freaks, that they are not evil, and that it's that our culture has a rich history of being drawn to the macabre, and there's nothing wrong with it, and indeed
Yeah.
it could be celebrated.
A couple of as we're talking, like things came coming in my head, like a couple of things that came that I would like to ask you this. There's two questions. So one is, do you think that there's like a subconsciously an adverse to horror because it reminds us that although the world is getting a better place gradually, it's still there's a real life demons basically. There's a real life horrible. There's still like terrible people going around harming others, and that kind of horror reminds it breaks that facade of like positive thinking and everything is awesome
Mhm.
thing. Do you think it's just a thought that came as to me as we were talking actually?
Yeah, I think that's a quite insightful point to make, and I do think it's true that for many of us, we know that, like an example, like death exists, and we could easily live our lives pretending it didn't exist, but we want to face it in ways that we can manage. And so horror films are a good example of that, particularly the zombie genre, which is such a blatant example of us trying to explore the concept of death, but in a kind of exciting way. But literally, like I talk about this in the Frighteners about dead bodies, and how since the Victorian times the dead body and the corpse has been removed from public view, and there was a time when we would have dead bodies around, and we would see, many of us would have seen one and or even
I mean,
washed one.
in Greece, you still have open coffin
Ah,
funerals,
okay, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like in the living room. So you go to someone's house at the funeral, like you have a dead body in the
Well, yeah.
living room.
Yes, exactly, and they call it the living room now, of course. But like in the olden days, they used to call it, in Victorian times particularly, they call it the parlor. But
No,
then
it was your living room in the house.
no, no. But what I'm saying is, in
Yeah.
Britain, in the Victorian times, we wouldn't call it the living room; we call it the parlor. But then gradually, the death industry started to grow, which is the growth of the insurance industry with death insurance, life insurance, I should say, undertakers, and medicalization of knowing that a body could be contagious, so we need to get the bodies away and bury them or keep them away from people. All sensible stuff, but gradually it meant that the dead body was removed from
Yeah.
public view.
Just a side note for some of the people who are listening. Funerals in Greece are the next day of the death. So we don't keep a dead body for a month.
Oh, okay, right. That's
So
efficient. Yeah.
I was actually realized like someone may think that we have a dead body for 2 weeks in the living room.
That's very efficient. Wow, you've got barely time to pass away. Like get him in the van. But anyway, so the body disappeared, and then so the parlor, which used to be called that, got rechristened as the living room, because it was in some ways you could say it wasn't a place for the dead; it was a place for living people, and the body gets put away, and so lots of people today have never really seen death and have not seen a dead body or seen somebody die. And I'm not saying that that's a shame and that we should try and get dead bodies back in the house again. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that if we are subconsciously aware that death exists, some of us just are happy to forget it. But many of us are like, oh, hang on, this is a relevant topic to me, so I'm going to have to address it in one way or another. And horror films and heavy metal and other things present death in a way that is just more manageable and is in a way that's actually fun. that puts a
Well,
sort of positive
sometimes
spin
I'm
on it.
thinking because as a kid I suffer from death anxiety,
Okay.
and sometimes I'm thinking if metal and horror actually helped me. I don't know, but I kind of wonder
Yeah.
sometimes, like extreme metal and horror,
Mm.
like helped me to manage this. Because let's be honest, like death anxiety is something that lives to all of us. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can say no, I believe in Jesus and I'm not afraid to die. Like that's nonsense. Like every human
Mm.
being is like clinically proven. Every human being has a fear of death. It lives in us.
Mm.
Is when becomes unmanageable. So it's always be like because it's an unknown, is it? No one ever came back to say that we
Yeah.
don't know what's happening, and
Hmm.
especially if you coming from a fundamentalist, conservative Christian background, I guess how even scarier it could be because like it's fire and brimstone if you haven't been like the if you haven't ticked all literally all the
Yeah.
boxes that because God
Mm.
is a masochistic,
Yeah.
abusive father, and it constantly it's after you to find reason to send you to hell because
Exactly, and that's why, ironically, you'll find that I did a lecture on something similar to this recently at the University of Bath about the paranormal being potentially a new religion, and as I talked about that, I talked about death anxiety at one point, and mentioned some statistics that say that yes, everyone will experience death anxiety to one degree or another, but some of us have it more than others, and the people who have it the least are at the two ends of the spectrum. So people who are very strong fundamentalist religious people who are r- really convinced, of I have a savior, I'm going to heaven, I'm trusting in him, not in myself. They tend to have death anxiety less. I don't mean if they've got family members who are like, oh crap, maybe I'm going to hell. That I see what you're saying there, but I mean people who are strongly, I'm bought with the blood of the lamb. I'm going to glory when I die. So they have less death anxiety. And at the other end of the spectrum, atheists have less death anxiety. It's everyone in between who has the most. It's the people who are maybe religious and have some doubts about it, or it's the people who are atheists and have some doubts, or the
yeah.
people who are agnostic and are not sure.
I mean, on this note, just to give a shout out, there's a fantastic book about death anxiety by Irvin Yalom called "Staring at the Sun." So Irvin Yalom is an existential psychotherapist, and for me as a Christian, reading his book was very interesting.
Mm.
But anyone that kind of wants to explore, like if they have death anxiety, it's a book
Yeah.
totally worth reading, especially if you're a Christian, because listening to that from a non-believer,
Mm.
from someone that believes like I'm dying and that's it, I cease to
Yeah.
exist, and he a lot of insights to offer that, like yeah.
Mm.
And the other question I want to ask you is, remind me, I was reading an interview of Graham Masterton a few years ago,
Oh yeah.
uh, and he was he was asked why he believes people are so fascinated with horror.
Hmm.
And for those who don't know, Graham Master is maybe the one of the best, if not the best, one of the best horror writers
Mm.
existing. Which, uh, and he said, because death is the great unknown.
Mm.
No one came back to tell us how it is. Lazarus came back. That was 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
You only live
Mm.
twice. Like, and so it's kind of like people, as humans, you get fascinated with horror because it's like maybe it's one side. In my thoughts, like kind of it helps us deal with our death anxiety,
Yeah.
and also it's like something we don't know. We get fascinated because like we exactly don't know. No one ever told us. We don't
Hmm.
know. Like even like as a Christians, the Bible says very, very, very little about what's happened next.
Yeah, but the Bible. Now you mention the Bible itself is quite happy and confident to tell stories and paint pictures that are really quite grotesque and violent. God, if he wanted to, could have easily toned down some of the imagery in the Bible, and some of it's just blatantly gratuitous, from like King Eglon and Judges getting stabbed, and it's saying the bit about like the blade disappeared into the folds of his flesh because he was so overweight, or up to Revelation, of like a kind of demon thing waiting between the legs of a woman as she gives birth because it's just waiting to devour the baby. I mean, it's like sick stuff. But it's in
I
there.
mean, that's a Cannibal Corpse
Exactly.
album
Yeah.
cover.
Exactly. Yeah. Baby Eater.
It's actually it's the last album.
Oh, sorry.
It's
I
a
see.
similar. Yeah,
I
not
didn't realize.
exactly. It is like a woman giving birth and like aliens coming through her flesh and eating her, like
okay.
eating
Yeah.
her their way out. It's like
Exactly. So a Christian could pick that up and say, like, that's disgusting. What sick minds would think of that, and not be able to realize
John the
that
Apostle was
you
one.
can pick up the Bible and the same image is there. They might not be aliens, but it's the same image.
Yeah,
And-
so I like to make fun of this, like because some people, like metal is so violent, and it's like, have you read the Old Testament recently? Like,
Completely. So if those things exist within Scripture itself, look, the following question to ask is, are we made in God's image? I think we are. Therefore, we must have similar creative instincts as he does. He blatantly is happy to tell positive and wonderful, heartwarming stories, but he makes plenty of room for the darkness and the darker colors, and he doesn't resist telling those
it's
stories.
the same thing. Like, and I always say because I draw coming into metal is something. It's like a theory it develops with Christians into metal. I found out a lot of times the whole Christian metal genre exists because Christian was so scared of stepping out and listening to non-Christian metal. So they create their own little subculture within a subculture, but that leaves them with like the metal has a lot to give, the non-Christian metal.
Yeah.
Which if you stuck on I only listen to Christian metal, you're losing a lot. And you don't allow that change in you, and it comes like exactly like from the Bible, like
Yeah.
all that sinner. So you cannot listen like to extreme death metal, like from like non-Christian, but then you read in the Old Testament, it's like nothing is
Yeah.
like it's an atheist joke, but it kind of goes like something. This is this book like full of incest, rape, murder, war, and we read it on kids every Sunday morning.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing you mentioned about, people feel guilty about listening to secular metal, if you want to call it that, so they have a version for themselves. And I think a lot of the Christian entertainment industry, and I don't say that in a mocking way, by the way. I don't have any problem with,
I'm happy to mock the Christian industry. To be
Yeah.
honest.
Look,
we can spend another 2 hours mocking the Christian.
yeah, but I don't mind. I don't mind the idea that there are Christian bands and stuff. But my problem with it is I do not believe in the secular sacred divide. I don't think it exists. I think it's a nonsense. So I do not believe that when you listen to I don't know Striper, you are somehow having an anointed Christian experience, and when you listen to I don't know Cannibal Corpse, you are having a satanic Christian experience. If God exists, he exists everywhere, and he has the potential to speak through all things. So I'm not saying everything is equally positive. Some things are,
As I say earlier, everyone has to draw their own lines. And
Yes, yeah, yeah.
as a church pioneer, sometimes people ask like, "What metal?" I say like, "I can't tell you what to listen. Like, you have to make that decision for yourself."
Yeah, but it's just that the Christian, say, entertainment or music industry exist on the concept of making lines.
I think, but at the same time, it cultivates it because how they make their money, isn't it? So you
Yeah,
need to keep that fear of the world to Christians, so they can come and buy your product, basically.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. And don't get me wrong, like I'm not. I hope I'm making this clear. I think I've said it already, but I'm not making the point that I think Christian, like even the cheesiest Christian music is bad. Like I had an experience recently which was quite stressful. I thought I might have a brain tumor. I had to go for an MRI scan. That was all pretty scary. Turns out I don't have one. Everything's fine. So thumbs up to that. But around that time, I did find myself while I was driving in the car, sometimes listening to stuff that is dark, but then tuning into the Christian radio station and listening to the cheesiest of all Christian music, not because that had the source of light, but only that it was just getting me in a space of focus.
It's
It was,
what was for what you're describing for me is extreme metal.
yeah, exactly. And so if you can get into that space through that, fine. Like for a section of this book, The Frighteners, when I was doing the exploring the paranormal, I had to spend a night in a kind of notorious satanic church, where grave desecrations had happened and paranormal experiences happened, and I was there by myself at like midnight. It's probably a bad idea because it got quite scary. But I remember going into that thinking, "Oh, this is going to be a fun experience," and then at like 1 o'clock in the morning, I was thinking, I feel quite scared. I haven't seen anything. And I whipped out my phone and I started playing like Matt Redman or something, like something really mainstream. But it was just like, actually, I've tipped over the edge of if I listen to, like, I love horror soundtracks, but that's what I mainly listen to. But this is not the moment for me to be listening to Nightmare on Elm Street by Charles Bernstein, the soundtrack. I was listening to it all day, but right now I need something mainstream and corny because that has its place as well.
I find it fascinating that I get that feeling a lot of times. I say like you completely like in the middle of the night, you know that you're literally on your own,
Yeah.
and you still get chills, and you know that
Yeah.
in your head that nothing can harm you, no one can jump on you, nothing, and you get chills, isn't it?
Yeah. But I don't think that's true. I don't think nothing can harm you. Like, even,
Like physical, nothing
no, but
physical. You know?
like, even mentally, something mentally could harm you. Like, what I was scared about that night was not getting attacked or anything physically. What I suddenly had a revelation of that night, and I talk about this in the book, is that when you go into these experiences where you have the potential of seeing something paranormal, a ghost or something like that, whether these exist or not, I don't know. But if you saw that with a group of friends or colleagues or a team, it's totally different from when you're by yourself. And I just suddenly had this thought at like 1 o'clock in the morning in this church by myself thinking, and by the way, this church has no roof. It's basically like in the middle of, it's like outside. I thought, what happens if I see something? Like, what if I see something like a figure rising out of the grave, like I've been told would be there? What happens if I see a hooded figure walking down the path? How am
You
I
start,
going to?
what you do, you start speaking in tongues and like you cast out the demon.
But that, yeah, I'd probably try that. But if I was by myself, what I realized was, I have enough doubt about things to think that could just be in my head. I might be hallucinating. I'm either seeing a figure, I'm seeing a real life ghost, I'm hallucinating and I'm going insane. And I just thought, crap, that's the scary thing. Because I've got
for me,
no one with me to verify what I've seen.
for me, says it kind of resonates with me because I grew up like in a culture like this. Like it was always like stories like, that woman going out and saw that, and that shepherd was because like in my hometown there's still like a lot of like uh, farms that like literally shepherds. You have like a couple of hundred of sheep, and that
Oh
literally
yeah.
just walk them to the mountain. That shepherd that happened to
Oh wow.
them. It's like that a lot of like you went to
What?
the graveyard and that and
Yeah,
such
yeah.
and such, and like and they see the candles or like someone like tapping. No, it's like
Mm.
so.
But yeah. Anyway, so that was a scary experience because purely about your mental state after seeing something scary. And so this, what I've been involved with, another thing I've been working on as well as my podcast is involved in a BBC show called Uncanny, which is just been getting people from around the country to share their stories of paranormal encounters.
This is something I wanted to ask you, like to move now. So like
Okay.
about that thing because we weren't planning to, but I'm kind of interesting to hear about it. And
Yeah. Well, I
yeah, I
mean,
mean personally, I'm even in my faith, I'm kind of like very cynical a lot
yeah.
of times, and like I'm kind of like those things don't exist. Like,
Yeah. I
but
mean,
I'll be interesting to hear your like what and some of the listeners might like
mm.
resonate with that. Like, but
Well, I mean, like it's been a massive show to be involved with, and the response to it has been phenomenal. So it's now going on a live tour, and it's just had to get a sellout thing in the theater in London, and just people flocking to this thing because they have a hunger for the possibility that there's something else, and that's quite interesting, I think, for Christians to think about. But what's happening in each episode, just someone will come and share an experience they've had, and then they will bring in a person who's like a believer. So I come in and talk about what I think about the situation. Then they'll bring in a skeptic, like a psychologist or someone who doesn't believe in this stuff, and will explain how they think these things happened. And sometimes those explanations are quite persuasive, but sometimes they're just not. But these are people, like, for example, an episode that I was involved in, the first one called The Evil in Room 611, of a geneticist who, when he was studying in Belfast, just had this experience of, well, I won't go into it, but like extreme poltergeist activity, seeing apparitions, books flying off off the shelves, and the door banging, and then I'm opening it and nobody there, and closing and the door banging. There's loads of this weird, crazy poltergeist stuff going on throughout these cases. People seeing, cassette tapes. People seeing cassette tapes like stack themselves without anyone touching them. It's nuts. And many of these people are saying, I don't believe in this stuff. I do not think it's possible that ghosts exist, but all I'm saying is I saw that happen with my own eyes, and other people were there and they saw it too. And so they're trying to make sense of it.
I
And
mean,
that's what the
I
show's
have a
about.
friend that is very into that, and obviously see they like a group of friends out there. They're going like to this haunted place and the other haunted place, and they
Yeah.
do Ouija boards, and and we're kind of talking about this with her, and I mean, I'm extremely skeptical,
Hmm.
almost cynical to that, and it's kind of like. And I know I can trust what she says because I know her and she wouldn't lie to me
Hmm.
just for.
So how can
So
you
it's
be?
kind.
How are you? By the way, I'm often cynical as well about some of these things, but I'll put it to you because I'd be interested. Like how are you cynical about the possibility of kind of supernatural manifestation, while also believing in an
A
incredibly
reanimated corpse.
supernatural? Yeah, yeah,
I
exactly.
worship a reanimated corpse.
Yes, exactly. I mean that's pretty wacky. So what's the difference? Is it because is it the specificity of some of these experiences? So I tend to find that for some people they'll say, "Oh well, yeah, I believe God made the world," but I struggle with the thought of a virgin birth. Okay, well, forget about
Yeah.
virgin birth. Forget about any specific miracle. Just think about the sheer possibility, the existence of God. Like, I don't meet many Christians who say,
So
"Well, God doesn't exist, but I'm a Christian."
it's yeah. I don't know. When it comes like to the paranormal, it's kind of in my like. What's the point of the paranormal? Like, what's the point? Or what's your purpose in life, dear
Mm.
ghost? Like,
Yeah,
uh, or you know, I mean, it's kind of like it, I was sometimes it doesn't make sense where God and the resurrection make perfect sense to me.
okay.
So so what's the point if and I'm at the same time I'm kind of skeptical on labeling it as demonic
Yeah, and I
because
tend, tend
I
to do
know
that.
people that involved to that and they don't have any you know signs that they open the door you know
Mm.
in inverted comments open the door to the devil. Their life are
Yeah.
they're happy as ever and live fulfilled lives.
Mm.
And the same time they go to mediums and they do Ouija boards and
Yeah.
they speak with their dead nannies. Like I don't know, like nuns, not nannies.
Yeah. This is dead nannies. Well, oh
No,
dear, what happened
so
to the nanny? There's a story.
yeah,
But it's just it's an area of our culture that is hugely popular, and interest in Christianity is rapidly diminishing, particularly with young people, and yet interest in the paranormal and these sorts of things don't only persist, but they're thriving. They're so popular, and I when I because I exist in these circles, and these days I don't work at a church anymore because so much work kind of opened up for me with
so
writing and stuff.
you don't pastor a church
No, no,
anymore.
not now. I do some chaplaincy work here and there, but I don't. Yeah, I'm not a pastor of a church now because not because I got kicked out because I liked horror, um, but purely because too much stuff was happening with writing, particularly with Oh yeah, I'm supposed to mention books on it. Not these books. I forgot. Fiction. Yeah, I'm supposed to mention fiction. And the main thing that happened with me that took me out of writing, sorry, of being a pastor was I started writing fiction, and so they're the most
So like
popular books.
horror.
Yeah, it's like crime fiction. So it follows a guy called Matt Hunter, who's an ex-church minister turned atheist professor, and he helps the police solve religiously motivated crime. And
Okay.
in the first book, he's on the trail of a evangelical Christian serial killer who basically baptizes people and then murders them immediately afterwards to fast track them to heaven.
It sounds like what the settlers did in America, isn't it? They baptize native and then later like
And they kill them. Yeah, exactly. So it's got precedent. Um, and yeah, so anyway, I'd write these books. So particularly writing these, there's another two in the series. Because of writing this stuff, and then the podcasting stuff taking off, then it was just getting too much for me to work at a church. And frankly, I really get excited about this creative stuff and the weird stuff I'm involved with. So I've been delighted to step out of local church ministry and just to be in some ways feeling like a more normal person. Even though I'm a weirdo,
I mean,
yeah,
I get what you're saying because I was at some point I was almost went into training
okay,
as a minister for the Salvation Army. That's another story. There's a lot of pain there,
okay,
but and also I have worked closely with like a lot of like ministers, and I see what you're saying, like the normal, because I was seeing that disconnection all the time
yeah,
because you get wrapped, even like the good ones. It was something that happens to you, I think, like inevitably. It's like a
mm,
side effect. It doesn't matter how good you are, how you committed you are to like
mm,
to being out of the four walls. It's something that happens to you that normality you live part of your normality. You're
Yeah,
losing it.
yeah.
I won't say straight, but like it's kind of like
Hmm.
I can see a lot of that, like a sense of disconnection with the real world,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, and I think for some people, some pastors, they love that. You know, they found their niche and they love it and they're
No,
brilliant
I'm
at
not
the
saying
job.
it's a negative thing, by the
No, I
way.
know. Yeah,
I think that's that's why I described it as a side effect.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, so for some people, I remember when I was training, I trained at a college called Spurgeon's College in London, and I remember people there saying, "Gosh, I know I'm going to be a pastor till the day I die." And I remember even when I was training before I got ordained, saying to the tutors, "I don't know why, but I don't see myself doing this like for the rest of my life. I feel like something else is coming for me, but this is important now."
It's
And the
part of your journey. Yeah.
yeah, and the tutor said, "No, that's great. Go for it. It's okay to be not locked into the typical being a minister of a local church." And I've really been enjoying, being out of that. But I think in some ways it goes back to my resistance to Christianity in the first place, because I didn't want to become a Christian to start with because I felt it would turn me into something that I wasn't. And when I was a minister, I enjoyed doing it, and it was a very meaningful thing. But there were certain things I felt I couldn't be honest about. Um,
Yeah.
like I like the comic Viz, which is this really offensive, shocking comic book, well, a comic magazine from the Northeast, and it's just really lewd humor, and it's just super offensive. And I remember thinking, oh well, I can't really be seen reading that because that
Yeah.
might look bad, and I don't want it to reflect badly on the congregation. Whereas now, I'm like sticking on Twitter or TikTok or, oh, I've been reading
Yeah.
this.
I mean, I feel I get what you're saying. Like even, I mean, I get for myself. Like a lot of times, I'm sometimes putting some things online. I don't do it because it's kind of I don't want to burn some bridges, basically.
Yeah.
Uh, but at the same time, I feel like no, it's not going to be the end of the world if I don't post
Mm,
my honest opinion about what
yeah.
the general of the Salvation Army said.
Mm,
Like it's not gonna be the end of
yeah.
the world. I can keep it to myself and have like a conversation with my friends about and
Yes.
be as explicit as I want to
Mm,
be about it. Like,
yeah.
you know, it's not the end of the world. Like,
Mm,
but even like with my previous chats, which I have like a lot to say. I mean, I may do it in conversations and like on post, but I don't do it on mine because I still have friends.
yeah.
So you don't want to lose your friends. And what you
No,
saying? You didn't want to become a Christian because you become something else. Was my experience my early years as a believer basically.
mm,
The church was trying to make me something else. So at the
yeah.
time I had only 3 tattoos that from before I get saved.
Right.
So now I have but yeah like,
Yeah.
that was after I got saved. but,
Yeah.
but it was a whole like it was like biblical literacy
Mm.
literalism I can't
Literalist.
literalism.
Literalism.
Lit-
That's it. Literalism. That's it. Yeah.
it's a Greek word for God's sake.
Yeah. Just.
And so I was like walking to church and like people would come down. So I have this one on my top arm.
Oh yeah.
Was my first one. So and I was always like wearing t-shirts that have my sleeves folded.
Yeah.
So I always wore my t-shirts. And
Yeah. Yeah.
come people like try to hide and it's like why are you
Mm.
doing this? Like why and they will kind of argue that I should hide my tattoos. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
why I need to do that?
Mm.
Because like, okay, like we believe this, but like okay, like
Yeah.
with that, I mean, back then I believed that tattoos are wrong,
Hmm.
but it's kind of like now I've got them. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I can't do anything about it. They're there for the rest of my life. Like,
It's good. It's good though. I think what you're doing is great because particularly with your church and the model that you're doing and the kind of the way you're embracing metal culture, is really important and positive and very timely, because that this was, say, the 1990s, when I was no being put off church because I wasn't allowed to be me. But that was just because I hadn't encountered someone like me now who said, "Oh no, you can still like scary films."
Yeah.
And so I think God is, well, to not sound too kind of prophetic and all that about it, but like raising up, or I don't like that phrase, but is releasing people to be their own freaky selves, and particularly with the dawn of the internet and the ability to basically have a niche that it can be worldwide, the sort of stuff you do.
So what you're saying, like something we were talking about. I mean, our ministry, to say it this way, is for here the area in Kent,
Yeah.
because this is our hearts, like to bring surround metalheads and punks and go around the message of Jesus in the close like in our area. But at the same time, it's kind of, you realize, like, I'm uploading those videos, like someone like in the other side
Yeah.
of the world, like
Yeah.
in Cape Town, can be watching my videos, and like,
Yeah.
and it's a Christian metalhead, and finding hope is like, okay, I'm not alone. I can be
Completely.
Christian and I can be a metalhead. It's like,
Exactly. And you don't have to rely on, do we have another Christian metalhead in the same town? That's the beauty of technology. And so, like, during the pandemic, for example, I had a novel come out, and then I wasn't in the mood to do any more writing, and I got into podcasting more. And during the pandemic, I started this project, which is called Creepy Cove Community Church. And this was wild. It was basically like a new podcast, but the podcast is full and immersive church services. Like, you're listening to
To
it.
be honest, I'm really intrigued to listen to it, because I was thinking
It's
it might
crazy.
give us very good ideas to run services.
Well, yeah, do listen to it, because there's like I totally like redone hymns, so they sound like dark and gothic and scary, and it's a mixture of. It's basically the idea of Creepy Cove is it's full and immersive church services broadcast from a mysterious haunted fishing town, where all horror movies are real.
When they first sent it to me, I thought it was an actual service, and I got so happy. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, it's a podcast.
And yeah, exactly, and that's the point. So we wanted people to listen to it, going like, "Hang on a minute, is there a real church?" Because it sounds like you're just listening to a recording of a church. The sound effects, and there's people get up and do the notices, but then you're like, "Oh, hang on a minute, there's vampires in this and
do,
werewolves."
do you get an offering plate?
No, but there were people who started to, and often atheists and Satanists even would send monthly money to
Really?
support this project. Yeah, because
I mean, that's for me, like, yeah.
it was amazing.
Believe me, it gives me hope. It fills
Yeah.
me with hope. What you just said, like,
Well, keep like concentrating on your niche. Like, you don't, and I would say, like, really lean into the digital stuff. Like, yes, you've got local people, and that's wonderful, but you have the potential to reach people like you who
And,
don't have a church like that down the road.
our pastor, because we run under, like, the wider Fresh Expressions
Oh yeah.
thing of the Salvation Army in the southeast.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we consider like a branch of the local Salvation Army, like the local church. And
Yeah.
the pastor actually was telling me they had a friend that lives like somewhere up north, and she's watching our videos, and that is her church.
Yeah.
I don't know. I found out because that person messaged our pastor, and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm sitting down with Roger and talking crap.
Yeah.
Like, and we're having fun. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, and someone on the other side of the country said, like, that really helps me. Like that, I feel
Totally.
for various reasons, I can't go to church. I don't want to go to church.
Mhm.
But that's actually gives me that sense of, it's like,
Well, people are looking
It's
for
like, wow,
community.
like, and I'm not even thinking of that. That's like, I'm literally, I love podcasting. We know,
Yeah,
like, we're very, very tiny, teeny, tiny podcast. Like, we hardly make an impact,
but
but
it doesn't. But it
I
doesn't
love
matter.
doing it. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
like I was talking to a podcaster the other day, and he was saying like, oh yeah, but you've got like a lot of listeners and stuff, and I was like, in a sense, it's irrelevant.
well, it was
It's
a time that no one knew you, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But also it's not even about like, oh well, maybe one day I'll have, 20,000 downloads per episode, or 50,000, or a million, or whatever. Make it more about like, imagine if you were running a church, a physical church. How would you feel if you had 40 people every Sunday, just 40? Now, I know plenty of churches that are still going on with less than that, with 30 people.
I mean, I know churches that going on. They have a paid minister with like 10 people.
There you go. So 10 people. So if you were running a podcast with just 10 listeners, would you think a lot of podcasters would think, oh, well, that's a waste of time. That's a bit crap, only 10 listeners. But if it was a church, you would be okay with it. To me, I think podcasters really underestimate what they're doing. And so just translate it to, I don't know how many people watch this or listen to this, but imagine if that was the amount of people who were coming to your church. I bet you would say that's a decent amount of people. And the riches are in the niches, as they say. So you don't have, me and you have some fairly obscure interests, I suppose. Not everyone's that interested in religion and horror or metal or whatever, but that's fine. But there's loads of people scattered around the world who are into it.
I mean, there was a comment one of our because the podcast gets uploaded as a video to our YouTube channel, and then the audio goes on Spotify.
Oh, okay.
So someone was commenting on our YouTube channel. It was comment like, I don't know how that got recommended to me, but here I am.
Yeah.
It's like, first of all, I was like, I pat myself at the back for good optimizing. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
felt like,
nice. Yeah.
yeah, I did a good work there.
Yes.
But then it's like kind of that randomness, like that random. I don't know from where they are, who they are. It's
Yeah.
just like YouTube doesn't give you anything. It's not like Facebook. I can
Yeah.
go and snoop at the profile and see
Yeah.
from where they are. It's just like just a name there, like, and that's it.
Well, yeah. Well, and it's like with this thing, Creepy Cove. It has sermons in it, but they're more like kind of talks on well-being, and it has prayer sessions in it and meditations, but they're based on horror films, and they're quite weird, and the music's intense. But I've had messages from people saying, "Well, look, I'm an atheist, but I'm really valuing the prayer times in these services, even though I know it's not a real church, and I don't believe in God."
And it's interesting because I think there's an emergence of non-religious
Yeah.
services to be meetings, because there's like a lot of people that they live in Christianity, they're losing faith, and
Yeah.
like, in a lot of cases, who can blame them? They have like totally valid reason to lose
Yeah.
their faith,
Yeah, definitely.
but they still want that community. So they're like a lot of like around the world, it starts happening this like humanistic. I know Tony Cambollo's son actually is big into that.
Oh, yes.
Bart Cambollo. So he runs a lot of humanistic services basically. They even
Yeah.
sing like Christian songs. It's like we are
Yeah.
the same for like I love that hymn. I'm gonna sing it. I don't care if it's a Christian.
Yeah, exactly. Good for them. I like all of that
But-
sort of stuff.
Yeah, but then it kinda, if you bring it that, if that happens, if we as Christian we can create that space,
Yeah.
then it's like we reopening those channels
Yeah, completely.
of
And
communication. Like
and
an
I s-
atheist can say, I'm listening to that like the creepy covey run by a Christian. It's kind of like, it seems that like it opens a channel of communication. That like,
Yes, and I think maybe one of the secrets of Creepy Cove is that even though I share my own faith in it, I specifically say to people, but if you're not into this, just ignore this bit. So even in the prayer times and the meditations, I'll say, I'm about to do a meditation, and at some point I might mention God or Christianity or Jesus or something. If that freaks you out in any way, either skip this bit, switch it off, or swap it out for something that's more meaningful to you. It's just making them have this know that I'm not trying to force them to become like me,
Yeah.
and that lets them just relax, and then they'll start to see the shared journey that we're all on, them and me. So I think it's definitely worth moving in these directions, but it's a freaky area for some Christians to cope with, and so like all
I
the
think
stuff I do is not, none of my stuff is funded by anyone other than like me and the income from books or podcast adverts and stuff, and so
yeah.
it's not easy to kind of to do these things, but I haven't ever approached a Christian organization or anywhere to try and
Then
to
get their
help
agenda
fund.
as well to that, isn't it? They're gonna have their own agenda.
Yeah, exactly.
Which understandable. Because if
Yeah,
they put their money in, they,
yeah,
I want you to
yeah,
do this
exactly.
as well.
And I don't really want that. And I don't want it to become like an evangelical mission
Yeah.
project. It's not really that. It's more subtle than. It's just at the risk of sounding Oprah Winfrey about it. It's like journeying with people wherever they're at.
I mean,
Which I
something
think's okay.
also comes in mind. Michael Frost said. I don't know if you know him. He's a missiologist
Okay.
from Australia. So he said, if you want to get people to get people's attention, do something they're not expecting. So running
Yeah.
church horror services, you get people's attention. Now
Yes.
you have their attention.
Yeah, definitely.
Now they're listening.
Yeah, I've
Because you do
certainly
something
noticed.
like completely weird.
Yeah, I've certainly noticed that, particularly in the media. Because you end up getting invited to do interviews and for things. And
I mean, I got the interview for
it helps.
BBC Southeast.
oh, did you? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's like not me, like as a church. Like,
Yeah.
I was the one. Like it's like that's surreal. Like how that happened because we did something weird, something that no
Yeah.
one expected. It's like okay.
Yeah, I keep pushing into that stuff because the more people, because you've got stuff online, then the more people who hear about that will go, oh well, I like metal, and I'm kind of interested in this spirituality stuff. Oh, I'm just looking for a community of other people who like music because for some people it's not even about the spirituality; it's just making friends, which is
Yeah.
not trivial. That matters. Having
I mean,
friends.
a lot of times, sometimes I kind of go into like a dark place, and I think like nothing's going on. Where we going? It's just kind of say praying, and like,
Yeah.
and then someone will make a comment, and like, or say something. It's like, yeah, okay, like, this is why.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
that nothing's happening. It's like something is happening that I don't see.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that comment actually made me realize that now I got like a glimpse of what's going on in the background. That I'm just one part of the bigger game,
Yes.
and I don't necessarily need to know what's going on today as long as I play my part. Not like I said, I'm not saying that God is a puppet master, but I play my part. Like
Yeah.
there are other people that simultaneously things happening. Maybe like maybe things are happening in Bristol right now. Like I'm connected with those people, and it's kind of I didn't
Yeah.
know they exist a couple of weeks ago. Now we know each other. We're praying to each other. It's like
Exactly. So you're doing the right stuff, and it's kind of pioneer work, isn't it? So the path can sometimes be a lonely one, but you're treading a path for people.
I mean, even
come
like if
behind
you
you.
say like metal ministry is not. I mean, it is about 30, 40 years old.
Yeah. Yes. It's not.
But it's still considered as a pioneering thing because it's still very small, it's still growing, and then, like in the UK we didn't have metal sets until like 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and even the ones that were existed they were like very small, they were very obscure. Now we kind of start meeting online. It's like there's like a church there, it's like another church there, like one in Birmingham, one in Bristol, one in Wales, and like
Yeah.
one in London. It's like what's going on here? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and like, I mean, I'm conscious of time. And like, we had a, I mean, I had a fantastic time. To be honest, like one of the best, one of the interviews I enjoyed the most. I enjoy my interviews a lot, but like that one, like because it's very new. So like, as a closing thought, like you spent like 4 or 5 minutes, but as a while you're still a minister,
yeah.
it was like any like tension between those things, like
No,
not for you personally, like
yeah,
in
yeah.
the
Not in my
environment.
mind, but yes, for other people, it can be. Like I've been interviewed on Christian radio stations before, for example, where like one particular example is when the woman who was presenting, I later discovered that she had had to mobilize a team of people to pray for protection over her because she thought that if she met me, she would potentially be exposed to a demon because of my interests. So, so I've had that before. I remember. I mean, I was after university. I was in a band for a while, and we toured Britain and Germany. I was playing drums for them and a bit of guitar and singing. Not a metal band, by the way. And I remember once we went into a church in England, and we were setting the drums up. And actually, no, sorry, I tell her I wasn't drumming for them. I was the singer. I'm getting mixed up with the bands. I was a singer for them and guitar a bit. But the drummer was setting up his drums in the church, and somebody from the church said, "Oh, could you please move the drums?" And we were like, "Oh, but that's really good for the acoustics and for us to set down the multi-core and everything." And they went, "No, we want you to put it under the cross." And we were like, "Oh, right, is it good acoustics there?" And they went, "No, but we feel like the cross will sanctify the beat." And we're like, "What?" Sounds like a kind of Prodigy album or something, like Sanctify the Beat. But no, and they saw something inherently evil about rhythm, you know.
What's like they were Baptist or something, like hardcore
No,
Baptist.
these I think this is an Anglican church, but
I
you
don't know
can,
a lot of like the denomination, but the Baptists have like a reputation of being boring and
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, Baptists in America particularly are very different from Baptists in the UK, and this is something I have to keep unpacking with everybody because anyone from America, and I have my podcasts are mainly big in America. That's the biggest audience there. If they hear you're a Baptist, they think, oh, you're a Southern Baptist, so you're anti-gay, you're anti-evolution, you're anti-women, and it's like, no, the English Baptists are a bit more chilled out, and I'm probably the most chilled out Baptist in the country because I'm very relaxed about everything, probably to a dodgy extent to some people. But yes, sorry, in answer to your question, yes, there sometimes are tensions, but for me, there isn't because I think there's a beauty in everything being bundled up together. So all of my contradictions are what make me a human being. And I'm not ashamed of those things. I'm proud of those contradictions because they're all part of the wire, the mess of wires that make who I am. So I was doing some BBC interviews recently and there was a string of them. I had to do like about 14 of them in the morning. And they kept asking me the same question, which was, oh, well, if you watch a horror film, do you spend the next couple of days praying about it? And
why?
I was like, what? And they were like, oh, well, surely you need to balance it out. And I would say there is no balancing. Like I'm as much walking with God as I watch the horror film as I am when I'm praying. It's just all bundled up together. And I think that's what makes us wonderfully beautiful.
I'm getting entertained now. Like that's my entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. It's entertainment. And also it's sometimes deeper than entertainment. It's exercising something in me, not like a demon. It's it's moving me in a certain way, or it's making me happy to be alive, or it's connecting me with other people. It's making me have a laugh or a fright. All these things are the stuff of humanity. They're not trivial,
Yeah,
and they're certainly not less important than me praying with someone because it's all connected.
yeah, yeah,
It's all part of the same world,
yeah.
secular and sacred. It's a cocktail.
I mean, we could spend another 2 hours talking about this. And
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
definitely
we've got
gonna
to
have
bring it into
there's
land.
gonna be 2 episodes.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Thing.
Yeah,
But yeah, I have a fantastic time. Thank you
yeah.
for
Thank you.
coming.
It's been fun. We've covered a lot of ground.
And yeah, so for everyone that wants to see Peter's stuff, we're gonna leave all the links either description. If you're on YouTube, it'll be in the description. On Spotify, will be on the show notes, so you can find all the links on what he does and his books and everything. And
That'd be great.
yeah, with this note, we'll bid you goodbye. You stay there for a couple of more minutes to debrief,
Okay.
and yeah, so yeah, leave us a comment. Yeah, it would be interesting to hear people's views on what we were talking about. So until next time, bye.